My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So, I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired.
Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired.
See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glowcloud team.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike Gibbs, and I'm here to help you build your technology career. I have been every kind of IT architect you can think of for the last 25 years. Network architect, enterprise architect, cloud architect, business architect. And for the last 2 decades, I've helped others get their first technology job, get promoted in tech, or build their technology careers. And you can find people that I've trained that are working at Apple, at Amazon, at Cisco, at Google, at IBM, at Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Palo Alto Networks, Zscaler, and many other wonderful companies. And the reason I come online, usually with my team at least once per week, is to help you get started. See, I remember in the beginning of my career, when I decided I was going to get a job in tech, I went and took a few boot camps. And yeah, I got a lot of certifications, but unfortunately, there was no one that was willing to hire me with what I learned from my 6 certifications. But I found out what employers needed, and I learned those skills, and poof, I got my first job as a senior engineer as my first tech job. I was a lead architect in about 3 months, and I was a senior architect about 6 months later than that. And within 2 years, I worked as a principal architect. And you can all do this too. You can have any job you want, as long as you get the right skills and you build the right plan. So I want to help you get your job, whether you want to be a cloud architect, an enterprise architect, an AI architect, or a security architect. I've trained them all. Maybe you want a different type of an engineering job, like a network engineering job or a cloud engineering job. That's fine too. I can help you get there. Just let me know what your goals are. Before we begin answering questions, I see some are already popping up in the chat box, and I love that because I love helping others. I wanted to let you know that on Thursday, every Thursday, we have a how to become a cloud architect webinar and how to get your first job. And it is completely free. Tomorrow will be in the morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. Normally they are at 1 p.m., but next week, tomorrow's will be at 11 a.m. Eastern because of the free YouTube events we have in the afternoon. And in this webinar, we'll go over the role of the cloud architect. You can ask about other architect roles as well or other positions. We talk about what we do and all the skills that you actually need. We talk about how to skip getting auto-rejected by HR if and when you're new, and what you can do to be seen by the hiring manager and get ahead, and every skill that you need to learn. And then we spend about 90 minutes answering any questions you have about your career. So join us tomorrow. It is completely free. And then join us through the rest of the week. We've got a lot of things that you can to help you with your career. On Friday, we have another interview day, and I'm going to walk people through the different types of interviews and what you need to do on each phases of the interview, because I want you all to get hired. And again, it will be all free. Join us for that. And of course, tomorrow afternoon, where you're going to hear from some architects that we train that are out there working as architects, and they're going to talk about what it's like being an architect. So I hope to see so many of you there. So join us for the free webinar. In the description of this video, we've got lots of things to help you, like free interview guides or free how to become a cloud architect or an AI architect and such. Please download them. They're free. All right, Tyrone, do we have any questions out there? John Doe. Hi, Mike. With the fast evolution in tech and cybersecurity jobs, what are some ways to future-proof your security architect career? So, John Doe, that is a great question. And I've been an architect now for 25 years, and I've always had an opportunity to grow. And the key is there's some things you want to do to stay future-proof. The first thing is have really good fundamentals. And I know that's going to sound crazy and counterintuitive, but here's the reason why. 90% of every new technology thing you see is a revision of an old technology thing. So instead of just trying to learn a bunch of random technologies and how to build them, learn how the technology works. For example, here's the first book that I use just to learn TCP/IP. Now, this whole book is one of 3 of just the TCP/IP protocol, and it explains things like ARP and the message headers that are in TCP/IP, and it explains UDP and various protocols inside there. Now, because I've read all 3 of them, whenever we're dealing with any kind of IP thing or anything that are changes, I still know what the packet should be like, the headers, and it's like, okay, new version of the same thing, new version of the same thing. And for example, when you understand virtualization in the 1970s, IBM was doing it. And then VMware was doing it in 1999. And now you have AWS Azure and Google basically implementing some version or flavor of the same clouds that existed for the last 50 years. But if you were new to it, you wouldn't understand. So learn the underlying technology and master your fundamentals. So that means learning things that are related to security, things like network security, what the packet looks like, various forms of packet filtering, various types of firewalls, how they work, what have you. Various types of identity and access management systems and where they fit in and the utilization, what have you. Planning for cybersecurity incidents, what to do, how you would do incident management, for example. Again, you're still good. And these are skills that are not really going to expire. Data loss prevention strategies, what could be done? How do data loss prevention systems actually work? Same thing with SIEM systems. How do they work? What are they doing? How are they aggregating logs? And once you start knowing this technology, you'll see every new version is going to be very similar. There was a Who song, Meet the New Boss, same as the old boss. And so there's that. And if you like, I think it's RFC 1925, where they say from the Internet Engineering Task Force, it was about 40 years old. And it says everything old will become new again. And that's my history. Same technologies, keep changing names, they get faster. So there's that. If your fundamentals are good, it'll be less challenging on you. Now, we have to think about what technology is doing. And we have to think about that in the impact of your career and who gets promoted, who gets paid more, and where your career opportunities actually are. We're dealing with a world where the technology can just about configure itself. Now, granted, as architects, we're good because we don't touch the tech, and for engineering, it's a little scary. For architects, AI creates more opportunities and more jobs for us. But AI can do those engineering tasks like configure or write code. In fact, Google's writing 25% of its code with AI right now. So, and we're all in the infancy of what this can do as GPU processors get better, and some of these LLMs are getting better, and especially if we start training things better and some better models. But we're almost there. So if you realize that, and if your tech fundamentals are good, if you see that the technology is getting better at building itself, at configuring itself, you have to think, what does that mean on the impact of technology careers? Well, the technology works today. And most businesses invest in technology and they get no business benefit. They get no return. And what I mean by that is 70 to 80% of all cloud architectures, for example, fail to provide any business value. Same thing with data center architectures. It's no better. It's just technology projects in general. McKinsey's data is 70%, and there's some other data that's there. So what companies really want is they want someone that can make the tech work for that business. It becomes less and less about the tech. And I can tell you, I knew this early on in my architecture career. Earlier on in my architecture career, when the tech didn't work, it was all about you being a tech guru. And as the tech got better and better and better, you started to see your architects, especially the highest paid architects, taking a more business role, a more business process re-engineering role, a workflow changes, modifying aspects of the business architecture, aligning stakeholders, giving presentations to stakeholders, giving presentations at conferences, building business councils of executives that can give you input on the new features, for example, you may need in your products, organizing large teams of people, baselining technology systems. evaluating organizations' financial needs, organizations' business and financial problems, and looking for technologies that can build those businesses better. You can see that changing in the architect job. And that puts us into the things that make you stand out as an architect. You stand out by having the business knowledge to be able to make your clients get a positive business return. You stand out as an architect by being the architect that can lead a team for the next billion-dollar design that's going to change the way a business works. You increase your opportunities by having the executive presence to walk in and command a room and be taken seriously by executives that be inclined to listen to your guidance. You stand out by being able to give a presentation and take your clients from point A, which is where they start, to point B, which is where they need to be for the success of their organizations. You stand out by being able to evaluate all those clients' needs before you even think about making a recommendation. You stand out by being a trusted advisor, someone that has no preference on any technology, no preference on anything. They're like a physician evaluating a patient's needs and coming up with a strategy to make that patient get better. And that's what a good architect is. They don't love serverless. They don't love cloud. They don't love data center. They don't love anything. They love making their clients successful. And then they approach that a business approach. What are the business goals, pain points, challenges? How does the business operate today? How do we make that business operate better in the future? And what are the systems that we need? People, processes, technology. You're in that world, you're standing out. So that's how you stand out, John Doe. And you can see it in salaries too. You can see as you move up in the strategic ladder, that's when salaries really change. So hope that answers your question. And I think the security architect career on the cloud, off the cloud, or anywhere in between is a great career. Probably my best recommendation moving forward, one of my top 5. Cloud Doctor. Hi, Mike and team. I've been reading through job descriptions for an enterprise architect role. In your opinion, what should I focus on now to prepare for a career into enterprise architecture? Are there specific certification skills or roles you should take as stepping stones? So I want to do 2 things. Let me pull up a really good LinkedIn post that I want to show you that I saw another tech executive make the other day. And if I can find this, I want to share it with you. Bear with me a second. Nope, this is not the one. But I really want. Bear with me a second. And if I can't find it, I will. I'll just discuss it with you. Here you go. And I want to put this because this person is saying everything that I've actually been saying for the last 10 years about job descriptions. But, you always hear it from me. But I want you to hear it from other people in technology. So I'm going to give you a LinkedIn post. I'm going to pop it in. And which chat box? Oh, here we go. Pop it into the chat box. And I really love you to actually read this LinkedIn post at your leisure. It's by Ethan Evans. He's a retired VP from Amazon. And in this LinkedIn post, he goes to talk about what I actually talk about every day, that is job descriptions are basically meaningless. And he talks about, and I talk about it every day, how what happens is most cases the employer doesn't even write the job description. Someone in another department, say HR or finance, is writing a job description for a job that they don't even know what it is. And that happens a lot of cases. So in many cases, you see job descriptions which look absolutely terrible. In other cases, job descriptions are actually written to cast such a wide net so that anybody will apply if they think that, and they can figure out which ones they need to weed out by their ATS systems. Sometimes they're written that way. Sometimes we write a job description today, and by the time it sits in HR for the next 3 to 4 months, by the time we need to hire someone, it's for a different job, but we don't actually interview them on anything that's even in the job description. So I'd love you to see his post in addition to mine at a time that you have. But in most cases, the job descriptions are completely meaningless. So here's what we do as enterprise architects. And I'll read you a list of about the top 50 things we do. I put it together a few weeks ago. And here's what we typically do, Cloud Doctor. And these are the skills you need to have. You need to be able to develop and maintain various forms of an enterprise architecture framework. Maybe an organization is, say, using TOGAF, or maybe they're using Zachman framework. And there's a way that in each one of these processes, you process your approach to architecture. They're not how to be an architect, but they're a process to doing it. For example, start with the business vision, then go to the business architecture, then go to the data architecture, etc. So you'll be working with them. Now, you'll be creating technology roadmaps that are going to be aligned with your client's business objectives. You're going to be bringing in people to help you analyze current IT systems and its infrastructure. You're going to be identifying areas for improvement in IT processes and systems. You will design future state architectural models, which is what the business is going to look like in the future. And that not only includes its new business processes, which is called the business architecture, but also the technology architecture in the future. You will be maintaining large-scale enterprise architecture documentation, architecture repositories, and architectural artifacts. You'll be collaborating with stakeholders to understand an organization's business requirements. You'll be conducting gap analyses between current architectures and future architectures or to-be architectures. You'll be looking for ways to provide strategic guidance to your team. You'll be performing impact analysis and assessing IT risks. So what's the impact of this technology on the business? What's the impact of this vulnerability we have on our systems? What could that impact be to our business, for example? We will be developing and enforcing architecture standards and best practices. For example, every wide area network coming out of the remote location will have to have this. It will have its wide area connected like this. Its routing will be configured in this manner. Its addressing scheme will be this. It could be something like that. It could be something cloud related. Now, we will be looking to optimize our clients' IT resource allocation. So we'll be looking at the opportunity cost of various technology products and projects and figure out what's going to create the greatest return for our clients. We will be doing a cost-benefit analysis and SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunity, threat for various things in the business and technology. We typically lead architecture review boards where basically there's a board of people that are going to determine if the architectural change is going to be safe. We may be designing and maintaining enterprise data models, for example. We're going to be looking to introduce agility into the organization's technology systems. We'll be managing vendor relationships. For example, in the average enterprise, we may have 1,000 different vendors that we have to contend with, and in enterprise architecture, where that's part of that. We'll be conducting technology audits. We'll be managing the IT portfolio and prioritizing investments based upon the expected return on capital. We'll be leading proof of concepts where we're going to have a team of engineers that are going to build something. We're going to coordinate those efforts. We'll be looking for metrics and key performance indicators so we can measure whether our architecture provided the business things that it actually needed to. We'll be looking for knowledge transfer between parties and documentation things. These are the kind of things we do. So that's what I think you need too. So what are the skills that are going to be necessary to do this? Well, they're going to be executive skills. You're going to have to have business acumen because you're going to need to understand the business, because you can't make business recommendations if you don't know business. And that's the biggest reason most architectures fail. The next thing that you ultimately need is sales skills, because I promise you the CEO and the board of directors don't wake up and say, Mike, how do I spend $1 billion on tech? I really want to waste money. So you're going to have to be able to sell a technology solution to the client. Otherwise, they won't invest in it and you won't be able to help the business. You will have to have what's called CXO relevancy because, and I've seen it, I've seen some overly technical person walk into a room with the CEO and start babbling about bits and bytes until that person was escorted out of the room and ultimately terminated for their job, because that's not how you present yourself in front of a CXO leader. Instead, they should have been talking about how the technology architecture or how that platform would provide either enhanced revenue to that organization, decreased operating expenses, improved operational efficiency, or something that the CEO cared about. So you have to have that CXO relevancy. Now, you will also have to understand business process re-engineering. And it's not really engineering, but if a business does things a certain way, for example, in order to go to sales, you go to the website, you register for a meeting, you conduct the sales rep sends a this and that. If that's a 5-step process, that is the way sales occur. And if you do something to break that with technology, maybe the company doesn't sell and then the company goes bankrupt and everybody loses their job. Here's a bad situation. So how do we go? Maybe there's a more efficient way from going from here to here to here to sell. And that's what enterprise architects do. So we have to be able to figure out what's the best way to do it. Is there a way, for example, the customer can just purchase here instead of here? And that means we need not only a new business architecture, which is the workflow of how things are done, which we do as enterprise architects, but the next thing that we're actually talking about is as follows. Now we're figuring out what technologies and what types of technologies combined together can make those business enhancements. So there's that. Though the next thing that you need to learn is having good, strong leadership skills. Because in an enterprise architecture role, if you're the chief architect or one of the many enterprise architects, you could have 50, 100 people that are going to be doing things that are going to be helping you in your architecture. And you're going to need good, strong leadership skills. You're going to need executive presence. And here's the reason. Watch this. Hi, my name is Mike. I'm an enterprise architect with 25 years experience. Let's talk about your business needs. Now, the reality is I could have the same brain and the same knowledge base. But if I were to say, hi, everyone, it's Mike Gibbs. I'm here. I've been an architect now for 25 years. All of a sudden, with executive presence, it feels something they're going to take me seriously. So we can all be shy, and I'm a shy person, but when you speak and externally in these roles as an architect, you need that level of executive presence. So there's that. Now, Cloud Doctor, the enterprise architect, is really very non-technical. I mean, if we feel like it's technical, but it's typically non-technical. It's 80% business and a little bit of technical. So for the enterprise architect, what are the technologies they need to understand? Well, they're going to be networking to a degree because nothing works without networking. They're going to be virtualization because I don't care whether you're in a VMware environment or a Nutanix cloud or an OpenStack cloud in your data center or AWS, Azure, Google. It's all virtualization. So you have to understand virtualization. You have to understand compute. You have to understand storage. You typically have to have some understanding of enterprise applications and what they can do. For example, what does a customer relationship management database do for a business? How can an ERP system help a business? And what are the ERP challenges that they might have? How would a business leverage unified communications and what could that do for them in their organization? What types of databases exist and how might they be used to help an organization better manage their data? What kind of data hygiene practices should an organization use? So we have to have some knowledge of the underlying technology, not how to configure because we don't touch it. We need to know a bit about how that technology works as an enterprise architect. As a cloud architect, we need to know a lot more about how it works. But remember that enterprise architect is a strategist. And by being a strategist, you're not going to be that close to the tech. Now, I'll tell you, I have people like Jermaine and Wallace, two people that were students of ours. They got their first tech job as an enterprise architect, and they never worked in tech before. But we provide a lot of enterprise architecture type training. I will tell you that many of the people that I train, sometimes they get what's called the most junior job in architecture, which is the solution architect. And I've got many examples like Ivan Tamba, for example, that are over at AWS that I have trained, and that was his first tech job. And I've got people like Bal Wender, who was a stay-at-home mom, who was also hired by Microsoft as a cloud solutions architect. So a lot of times people get a solutions architect job as the first one. Yesterday, I had someone in England tell me got their first job as a cloud architect. I had Nafuli was a student of mine and got his first tech job as a chief technology officer, which is really like an enterprise architect. So there's no specific path. The specific path is how good are you? What do you know? How good are your skills and how good is your attitude, your energy, enthusiasm, and passion? And how well can you sell yourself? Selling yourself is going to be one of the biggest keys to being hired. So in the world where people say, don't compare yourself to others, I think that's the most dangerous and ridiculous advice I've ever heard. And I'll tell you what. Each and every one of us has some unique skill or innate ability that separates us from everyone else. Every one of us has something. It's your unique superpower. It is your unique competitive advantage, but you need to find it. Now, when you go on an interview or you go on a job, you're competing against someone else. So the hiring manager is going to be comparing you to others. So if you don't compare yourself to others, you don't know how to win. So in the art of war, they say, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you'll always be victorious, or you need not fear the result of 1,000 battles. And that's the secret to winning. So if you know the skills that you need to be for an enterprise architect, and I just gave them, and then you see what your competition is. Okay, My competition is this. They don't present themselves very well. They lack business acumen and they don't like to talk. And then you say, okay, well, you know what? I happen to have gone to an MBA when I was a little younger, and I've got this. I've got the gift of gab, and I like to go out there and talk and meet people. Now, maybe that ability to communicate, meet people, and build relationships is your biggest strength. Maybe you dazzle them with your communication and how effective you are at getting your point across on the interview. Maybe you know how to use that communication and build a relationship. So while you're interviewing with that hiring manager and the rest of the people on their team, they love you and they're like, I don't know why I want to hire this person, but I do. And if it's your first job when you're marginally light on skills, that can help you too. So I would say shoot for the goal you want, train for the goal you want. And worst case scenario is you take a job as a cloud architect or a solutions architect if you've got the training to do that too. And that's why we train our enterprise architects with cloud architects too, so they could take either road. Obviously, the enterprise architect pays more, but a lot of times the cloud architect job is more plentiful. So sometimes you want to move around and get what you want. But ultimately, it's all about being what you want, and you'll get there with the right training, the right energy, enthusiasm, and passion. And if you got the right plan and you keep sticking till you win, no one can stop you other than you. So go out there and win. Love that question, Cloud Doctor. And actually, I don't think he answers his question about certifications. So there's really not a lot of certifications for big jobs. And here's what I mean. There's no certification to be the chief information officer. There's no certification to be a CEO. There's no certification to be a great management and executive strategy consultant. Now, there are certain certifications that are helpful. Typically, I recommend one of the cloud certifications, like the AWS Solutions Architect Professional or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert or the Google Professional Cloud Architect. Understand, Cloud Doctor, there are zero actual architecture in them. They're actually more systems administration certifications. But here's why I like it. They will make people want to interview you. And as long as your training is still good, you'll be good to go. I also like TOGAF 10 specifically. And TOGAF 10 will not teach you how to be an architect. But if you already have all the skills to be an architect, it will give you a framework. And it'll keep your brain from going down the path of engineering, which many people do by mistake. And what I mean by that is it is a process. It'll say, find the vision of the organization. Okay. Now, if you're an architect, you need to know how to do that. And that's the kind of thing we teach people to. And then they would say is document the current business architecture. No, they don't teach you how to do that. That's the kind of thing we do when we train architects. So certifications are really basically about a process or a methodology, which can improve your abilities, but they're not going to make you an architect without architect training. But if you've got two certifications like that, you're going to stand out on paper. Two good professional level certifications. Make sure you don't have any engineering certifications or systems administrator certifications on your resume because it doesn't match this role. Remember, this is an executive role. You need executive stuff. And then you should be good to go. Sorry about that, Tyrone. I realized afterwards that I missed one of the three questions. Dingleman, good to see you. Hi, Mike. I've gotten close to some of the architecture side of the company over the last few months. Great. When you're ready, how should you go out pushing to move to an architect role from your current role? Well, Dingleman, I would actually talk to your manager first. First, I'd make sure I had at least a year in your current role. And I think you have at least a year, but I would make sure I have at least a year. I'd make sure I get a good performance review. And then I would say to my manager, I really love it here. I enjoyed all this time I'm working as, say, a security engineer. I've learned so many things. I've met so many people. But what I find I really love is architecture. Would you support me becoming an architect, Mrs. Manager, Mr. Manager, what have you? And if so, what would you like me to do on the back end? So by doing it that way, here's what you're really asking. You're asking, would you support me? Now, typically when you do this, what will happen is your manager will say, yes, of course, Dingleman, we love you because I know who you are. You're a great guy. And here's some money for training. And maybe you go to some executive training, and I know you have access to good architecture training as well. You keep doing that architecture training. You go to some additional executive training that your manager wants you to go to, which will make your manager happy. That'll probably make you better along the way. And then build a plan and ask them for their support on the plan. Okay, in this 12 months, I will do this, 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 and this. And how would you feel? In the meantime, I'd start building relationships with other managers in the department and letting them know that you're doing architecture training, your manager's sending you for additional training, and you'd like to be there. And as long as you're building a good name right now, and you're doing a great job, and Dingelman, I know you, and I can't imagine why you wouldn't, then this would be a plan that's going to work good for you. And I really hope you get to stay in that company you're in, because it's one of the best companies in the world, especially for architects. Data Wrangler. How do you achieve 5 nines availability in the cloud when the individual cloud services offer at most 4 nines? How does the math work? Isn't the overall math a multiplication of the components? So, Data Wrangler, don't assume anybody is going to get 5 nines in the cloud computing environment for the most part, unless they do the following. So, if you take, if we look at a cloud provider's data centers, they say their availability zones, for example, are 4 nines each. I'm sorry, 3 nines each. I'm sorry, no, 4 nines each. Wait, yeah, 3 nines each, 99.9%. So that means if you take 2 3 nines data centers, you get 99.99%. Now understand, I can build a single data center in a business that'll get me 99.95 or 98% availability in a single data center. Why can I do that, but the cloud provider can't? Because the cloud provider is such ridiculous hyperscale, and there's a lot of things they have to do to be hyperscale. When things break hyperscale, it's a lot harder. Things tend to break as we start breaking things and get super big on the networks. There's a lot of things that could go wrong there, if we keep that in the back of your mind. Additionally, private networks, we can run quality of service on them. We can run a lot of network protections because we know what the traffic is. The cloud provider can't. So understand, we could get 2 really good data centers to basically get us close to 5 nines, if many other things also were going on at the same time. We're going to talk about what those are. So if you took 2 availability zones in AWS and you took 2 availability zones in Azure, and you didn't use any of the cloud provider services like their databases, for example, or any of their proprietary applications, and for example, you put an OpenShift Kubernetes control plane in multiple clouds, you do everything you can with virtual machines, and you build your own databases on your own virtual machines, and databases potentially that can write and sync across all nodes, for example, Apache Cassandra in your three data centers. You can get much closer to 5 nines because now you've got 2 availability zones in 2 clouds. Each one should give you 4 nines plus 4 nines should be close to 5 nines. Now, keep this in the back of your mind. So first, as we look at it, even if the technology can get you to 5 nines, if Bubba comes on your network and does something silly, Bubba can take down your whole network. Billy Bob makes a BGP error, Billy Bob can take down your whole network. So when we're dealing with this, we have to think about all the change control processes that need to occur. What does that mean? When a change needs to occur, who needs to approve it? What time can the change actually be made? And that's where we start getting into the complexity of 5 9 systems. It's not just having 2 of everything, 3 of everything, 4 of everything. And it's not just redundant power, redundant switches, redundant networks, redundant cables, redundant everything. It's also the right architectural design that are leveraging the right components that you can use to tune your failover ability. Again, we got many more tools in the private cloud than we do in the public cloud for this. So we're going to lose a lot there. So 5 nines is tough. I've done it with 3 or 4 businesses in my life. All of them have spent more than $1 billion in technology and spent a lot of time in processes. It's related to how good your architectural documentation is so you understand things. It's related for the processes for change. It's related to your QA and your testing environment. So it takes a lot to build it. So the key here is when we're going multi-cloud for high availability, we can't use most of those individual cloud services. And Data Wrangler, that's the reason I say certifications have very limited value. Because the main components that we can use in multi-cloud are things like virtual machines, there are things like containers, there are the storage area networks, what have you. Can't use DynamoDB in 3 clouds, so I have to throw it away. Can't use Elastic Compute Service, I have to throw it away. Even Elastic Kubernetes Service, great, it's open standard. So now if I've got a control plane in AWS, but I'm still using Azure and Google and AWS goes down, I don't have anything to control my Kubernetes clusters that are sitting in Azure and Google. So that's no good. So I've got to go to OpenShift. So the key is not using those cloud services, effectively using the cloud in more like a data center environment. And ultimately, at that point, it's usually cheaper and better, faster, and cheaper to do it in the data center. So the question is, can you do it? Yes. Is it easy to do in the cloud? No. Will it cost far more in the cloud than the data center? Absolutely. But it definitely can be done. But it's going to take a very sophisticated team of people. People that can really look at that change. Okay, somebody wants to make a BGP change. Okay, what's the implications of that thing coming into the RIB and the FIB, and how's that going to affect and propagate through the rest of the network? And what does that do? Hope that makes sense. But yes, it can be done. What's the pay difference between an enterprise architect and a solutions architect? Well, it kind of depends on the role. So bear with me a second. I'll set this up so I can share something. Bear with me. Okay, great. So if we start looking in the roles themselves, you can see as they typically become a little more technical, the pay tends to be a little bit lower. So in this particular example, you can see the lower pay would be these DevOps and cloud engineers because they're more technical. As we typically get into a cloud architect pay, it's in that 150 to 270 range. And when we start going up into enterprise architecture, they're showing 172 to 263. This data is from Glassdoor. Honestly, I don't know any enterprise architect that's earning anything less than $300,000. I just don't know of any. But, I'm sure there's some lower paid people that are out there somewhere. Now, as you look towards this, you can look at a couple ways where things go, and I'll show you some additional statistics along the way. So within 2 years, I was a principal architect, and the equivalent of that pay was what I received 20 years ago. And then I started moving in the distinguished architect. And what's the difference? The principal architect's an architect that's very good at their job. They're typically taken pretty seriously. They're typically doing things that are more important. When I reach that distinguished architect level, now I typically have someone like, if you saw Russ White today on our YouTube channel, you should, because he's a legend in architecture. Russ was the guy that would basically tell Cisco what kind of extra features you need on your routers, so they would go build it for them. He was one of the guys that helped create the CCDE and the Cisco Certified Architect program. Those distinguished architects are at constant industry events, and they're working on RFCs and new standards and technology. So when you're dealing with that distinguished architect, you're dealing with someone that's pretty techy, but it still has all the business acumen executive in the same person. And as you see, the chief architect is an enterprise architect role. It becomes higher paid. And still, I don't know many architects that are earning as little in these chief architect roles that are earning this little, in my experience. And if you look towards this, and I can show you some other salaries, and I can show you the difference, it's all based upon business acumen. So if we look at a principal solutions architect job at, say, Amazon or Oracle, or I don't have Microsoft. So the average pay for a principal solutions architect at Microsoft is about $378. The average for Amazon is about $372. The average for Google is about $500. Now, understand there's about $200,000 wiggle room up and down in these architecture roles. So the principal architect at Google is actually pay range is $394 to $677. And at Amazon and Microsoft, it's basically $300 to $500 for that principal solutions architect. What is the difference between the $300,000 architect and the $500,000 architect? Both how desirable they are to the company and how well they performed in their interview, because that'll get you a higher salary. But mostly, it's your business acumen and sales skills. You're a guy like me that focused on learning sales, you earn a lot more because you're bringing money into the company and they reward that. I didn't know to look for that. I focused on tech early in my career. Some executives gave me that guidance. But now look at any other job where you need to combine business acumen and still tech knowledge at the same time. Senior director at Cisco on average 530. Senior director at Palo Alto on average of 530. So IT director at NVIDIA. Well, NVIDIA you would think is high, but that's really what we're trying to talk about here. We're trying to show that as you look at it, you see that pay range just go up. So all in all, at the base, there's not that much difference, maybe $100,000 here or there between the solutions architect and the enterprise architect. But what happens, there's a lot of chief architect roles that pay $800,000 or more per year. There's a lot of C-suite roles that pay a lot more, like a CIO or a CTO. So you may see that enterprise architect called the chief architect, called the chief technology officer, and it's a business/technology executive. That's a great question, Relevation TV. What's the difference between our training for both enterprise versus solutions architect? So Relevation TV, I would never train a solutions architect. I train a cloud architect, and I'll tell you why I train them, although any cloud architect can work as a solutions architect. So here's what a solutions architect is. I work for one vendor, like AWS. I design, present, and sell only AWS stuff. Now, the reason I would never train anybody to be a solutions architect is the only three companies you can truly work for as a real solutions architect in cloud is AWS, Azure, and Google. Now, the other reason I never recommend training for solutions architecture is 98% of enterprise businesses, which is where you want to work because they pay the most, are multi-cloud. So they can't use solutions architects. They need cloud architects. So let's say I'm talking about a cloud architect, like a cloud solutions architect versus just a solutions architect. 89% of all businesses, meaning not just the big ones, are on multiple clouds. So if somebody comes to me and they're like, I know AWS and AWS stuff, it's like, great, but you can't work with me because I'm on 3 clouds. If someone says, I know cloud, okay, now, if they really know cloud, to them, it doesn't matter if they're working at AWS, Azure, Google, Cisco, Alibaba's cloud, Dell's cloud, Nutanix cloud, Opus.cloud, because they know all clouds. So let's say we're taking a cloud architect, and I'll talk about mine. I train people for cloud architect roles because I train everybody for multi-cloud architecture because that's the real world 90% of the time. And if somebody only knows one cloud, sorry, no jobs for them. So there's that. So that's why I train everybody to be a cloud architect. Now, of course, my cloud architects can go work for AWS, like Ivan Tamba or Jordan Katil, for example, or Coyote. They all went to AWS as solutions architects as their first job after our training, first tech jobs ever. Or, I've got other people taking bigger jobs as cloud architects, like Al, who took a senior cloud architect role at Deloitte. So I train that. But the point is, you can get the solution architect job by training to be a cloud architect. So here's what I do in my cloud architecture training. I train my people for everything they need to be a cloud architect. That means networking, it means security, it means AI, it means storage, it means compute, it means everything. All my students are trained to design hybrid multi-cloud architectures, which is what they're doing. Now, in this training, I give all the business skills that are necessary to learn the role. I give all the technical skills that are necessary to do the role. And people stay in our training program until the day they are hired as an architect. They've got a year in the live classes and unlimited time in the online training program. So people with us, they come to us, they stay until they get hired. And I got somebody hired yesterday over in England, and I already got notified of another person who got hired just today. And I can't wait to do the background checks because I know both of them and they're both awesome. So that's our cloud architect program. It's got live classes. It's got all the training you need. Now, the enterprise architect program that we run builds on our cloud architect program. So you may have heard me mention earlier that most enterprise architects are very non-technical. And I mean so non-technical that I know many enterprise architects that have never worked in tech. They got an MBA and poof, they're an enterprise architect. I've seen it. I've met lots of people from the CTO space and CIO space in there as well. Guess what? They still made great CIOs because they had the business acumen. They built a team of great architects with them, so they were covered. What I do, because I've seen so many enterprise architects that really don't know the tech well enough, is I take our cloud architect program, and then I add additional enterprise architecture training. So additional executive presence, additional leadership, additional business process engineering, additional architecture frameworks, all that extra enterprise architect-y stuff. And that's additional modules that are given to my students in addition to the cloud architecture modules. And then we have an additional live class per week, which turns it into a 4th class per week. And by doing that, our enterprise architects are trained as cloud architects and enterprise architects. And I've done it for the following reason. Sometimes I put somebody in an enterprise architect program, and the first job they get is a solutions architect or cloud architect. And if they bought a program for less than $5,000 and they get a $180,000 cloud architect or solutions architect job, I'm happy and they're happy. And they do that for a year or two, and then they've got the skills to move into that enterprise architect job. But at the same time, maybe they're like Jermaine, who got his first job as an enterprise architect. Maybe they're like Wallace, who got his first job as an enterprise architect. You can see the video of Wallace Agana on our YouTube channel. And the point is you can all do it. But that's why I do what I do. I really like our people grounded in technology. And I'm not one to tell people that they need to learn engineering skills. But when I tell somebody they need to learn the technology, if it's BGP, my students understand BGP. They understand how to design the BGP pairing, traffic, engineer their traffic, figure out how to use it, why to use it, where it goes. They may not be on the box configuring it, but they know what's necessary to do the job. And I kind of hope that helps. And Relevation TV, if you haven't seen it, check out the video with me and Russ Wright, where we talked about why people get crazy and go hands-on, hands-on, hands-on. They do 1,000 labs, and then they show up in an architecture interview and can't answer a single question. And I hope that also helps people too. Because this is the conceptual, how does it work? How does it fit together kind of piece. Kepler. Are we saying the job descriptions added on job putters are not realistic or fake? Yes, 100% unrealistic. You have seen job descriptions which are absurd, asking for excess details. If so, why do companies do this? So here's the thing, Kepler. I have never seen a real job description in my entire life. I have never had more than 10% of the skills listed on a job description, and I've never been on an interview where I wasn't hired. Here's how bad it is. So Kepler, there's one video with that where I have me and I have Christina Marino. She's the CEO of IT Excel, a national recruiting firm in New York, and she's awesome. And she talks about one of the reasons why job descriptions are pretty bad. I also dropped a link from a VP, I think his name is Ethan Evans from Amazon, who 2 days ago made a post about the same thing. And if you look at any of our videos for the last 4 years, we say that the reality is this. We have never seen an accurate job description on our entire life. And you want to know how bad it is, and then I'm going to give you all the reasons why, but I want you to actually see this. So it's so bad in tech that many people have seen cloud architect, the solution architect job descriptions, and they've seen things like Python or DevOps or SysOps or Linux or Terraform. And it breaks my heart because every day I've had people that studied 5 years and they don't understand anything about architecture. So we've all seen solution architect and cloud architect job descriptions, which say you need 50 gold medals, 1,000 years of experience in 50 people's different jobs. And I'll tell you what happens. So just to put it into argument's sake, this is what CIO Magazine and Gartner looked and said, cloud architect job descriptions are ridiculous. They're not hiring for our architects. So they actually posted their own job description. What does a cloud architect do? And I think this will help you, and then I'll give you the rest of the reasons. So it said, according to Gartner, the three main high-level responsibilities of a cloud architect are leading the cultural change for cloud adoption, developing and coordinating a cloud architecture, and developing a cloud strategy and coordinating the adoption process. So let that sink in. So when I talk about leading the cultural change in cloud adoption, okay, now we're going to move a technology platform. That means meeting with stakeholders, managing with stakeholders, creating marketing campaigns of the new systems, having users and champions that are going to get people to use your systems. Doesn't mean DevOps, SysOps. And then it said developing and coordinating the cloud architecture. You always hear me talk about building an architecture team. In fact, I made a video on it. Tyrone can pop it a few weeks ago. And when you got an architectural project, you build a team of 15 to 50 people. And they're going to be people for, say, from networking, security, big data, AI, databases, applications, software people. And they're going to baseline what you've got. And then you're going to lead that team to design something. That's developing and coordinating the cloud architecture. And then it says developing a cloud strategy and coordinating the adoption process. Yes. Designing hybrid multi-cloud, what do we put in which cloud? Do we do a phase one? Do we do a big bang approach? Do we have transition architectures? That's what it said. And then they said, wait, what else do the architects do? Well, help find talent with necessary skills, assess application software and hardware, create a cloud broker team, establish best practices for the cloud across the company, select cloud providers and vet third-party services, that vendor management, oversee governance and mitigating risk, working with IT security people to monitor privacy and develop incident response procedures. Incident response procedures, we've had an incident. You talk to the press, you speak to legal, you speak to regulators, you are the people that fix things. That's procedures. Manage budgets and estimate cost and operate at scale. So note, that's the real job description. In fact, that's what the customers, the CIO said, this is what I want to hire. So here's what happens with the ridiculous job descriptions. One is in most cases, and I love the way Ethan pointed it out, I want to hire somebody. So then I find somebody in HR and finance. Now, neither of these people knows anything about the job that I want to hire someone for. So they go out there and say, oh, I need a cloud solutions architect. What should I do? And they have no idea. So what do? They go to Indeed, Dice, or whatever. They take 2 or 3 various job descriptions. They put it into this 400-page thing. And they say, look how beautiful it is. Look how comprehensive it is. So they do that. Now, then, and I want you to understand how bad this is. So then people start looking at job descriptions to figure out which stuff to learn. And of course, in any one of these job descriptions, it would take you about 1,000 years to be able to do competently what they're asking you to do, because each one of these skills takes 25 years to really be good at. So now you're not, unless you're a vampire and you live 3,000 years old, it's impossible for anyone to get one of these jobs. So people are training for jobs. They're spreading themselves so thin, which is why I always talk about the job descriptions being bad, that when I interview 1,000 people, I can't hire any of them. It's that bad. So what ultimately happened? So now the employers created stupid job descriptions, and I'm going to call them stupid because they're unrealistic. And now what's happening is people are rewriting their resumes, and then they use AI to rewrite the resume to match a job description. Then, poof, HR's internal recruiter that knows nothing about the role then sends them to us as a hiring manager. And now I'm hiring a network architect, and they've got network architecture, software development, and 1,000,001 things that managed to say to me. And I say, what do you know best in networking? They say it all. And I say, how would you single an MPLS traffic engineer tunnel where I'm guaranteed to get 1 gigabit per second? And they say, huh? You said you know everything in networking. Okay, is there a section of networking you know? Yeah, I know OSPF. Okay, talk to me about the LSAs in each one of the areas versus a traditional area versus a backbone area versus a stub area versus a not so stubby area. And I get crickets. And I say, but you said you've got 25 years of experience with OSPF. Well, it's not that. Okay, what is it that you do know? And then they point to something else on the resume and ask them about that, and they've never done it either. And why is it? What's going on? Well, the really bad job descriptions are causing people to create really fake resumes. And then what happens is people get to us, the hiring manager, and we interview them, and we can't hire someone we don't trust. So we interview someone, they lied to us, it's over. Interview's over. So then, Kepler, what do we ultimately do? And this is why I want you to see some of those videos with Christina Marino that's on our YouTube channel. She is a rock star in employers. What happens is, instead of going to those internal people that you consider that, if you've ever seen the movie The Terminator, they got a ridiculous job description that no one in the world could ever do. And then if you don't have the perfect resume, you get rejected, 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 rejected. It reminds me of an AI robot like Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, just auto-rejecting people. So you either get rejected or you have a fake resume. So the hiring managers are so tired of getting dragged through the mud like this. So the next thing they do is they call an executive recruiter. And they'll pay this executive recruiter $40,000 or $50,000 just to find them someone. And then the executive recruiter does not have you apply for the job. The executive recruiter knows the hiring manager, Kepler, and here's the way it works. Let's say I'm a recruiter, and Tyrone in the back, you can't see him, but he's back there. Tyrone's over there in Cape Town, South Africa. And let's say Tyrone's the hiring manager. I'd call him up on the phone and say, hey, Tyrone, it's Mike. How are you? And he'd say, I'm doing great, Mike. Did you find me someone? I'm going to say, Tyrone, I found this rock star of a cloud architect. Their name is Kepler. I know where they trained. They trained at Go Cloud Careers. They've got a lot of executive presence. I've spoken to them. They've got good business skills, good tech skills. Would you be interested in interviewing Kepler? And then Tyrone says, of course, Mike. So then I call Kepler and I say, you've got your interview. Now, Kepler, assuming you've got the right skills, and then I wouldn't put you in front of the manager if I didn't do my due diligence as a recruiter. I also coach you as the recruiter on what the hiring manager likes, what the hiring manager cares about, and I do a practice interview with you. So 2 things happen by using the recruiter. First, you didn't apply for the job. Then you didn't get auto rejected. Then the recruiter called the hiring manager and pre-sold you to the recruiter. So the hiring manager is now biased to like you, and more biased because I've given them the last 5 people that were successful hires. Now let's say Kepler, they say hire you. Guess what? Here's the magic that occurs. The recruiter will negotiate back and forth for you if you want to get you a better salary. Then you'll finalize the offer, and then they're going to say, oh, Mike, or I'm sorry, oh, Kepler, by the way, we've made the decision to hire you, but you have to fill out an application anyway. So, but it doesn't matter. So you're going to fill out the application, you're going to get your pay, you're going to start your new job, and you're going to enjoy your new job. You're going to do great in your job, and you're going to get it promoted. And you know what you're going to get somewhere between 3 and 12 months later? You're going to get an auto rejection from those HR terminators. You are auto rejected because you can't meet the needs of this company. Please consider applying back in the future. But it doesn't matter because you're already there and you already got promoted. And I got to tell you, I've only interviewed with 5 companies and I've gotten offers from all 5, 2 for better jobs than the ones I interviewed for. But it was really so interesting. It always went through a recruiter. And I never had any of this nightmares of all the auto rejections. And the only time I ever applied was early in my career, and that's why I stopped applying, and I developed a strategy to get recruiters to come to me, teach people how to go to recruiters, teach people how to sell themselves to the recruiters, teach people the actual skills they need for the real jobs. Kepler, what's my suggestion? If you find a job that you like, I want you to figure out what those skills are. You can ask us for any career you want, and I'd be more than honored to help you. Here's what you ask and who you don't ask. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that are like an associate solution architect with a YouTube channel. An associate solution architect is a trainee. And if they graduate their trainee, they're promoted to solution architect. If not, they are removed from the company. So there are people that are associate solutions architects and people that are still trying to get hired telling you what skills to learn. You can't listen to them because they don't know. If they knew, they'd be working in the field. So what I want you to do is I want you to find people in the role that you want that are highly successful. So let's say you wanted to be a security architect. I'd start finding principal security architects and distinguished security architects and VPs of security architecture and ask them what they want in a person for that role. What are the key skills of this role? Now, Kepler, why am I saying this? Because the people at the top know what it takes to get to the top, and that's how they climb to the top. The people that are at the bottom trying to figure their way out, they could be the smartest people in the world, but they don't know how to get to the next goal, or they'd already be there. Because the skills that get you to your first role are not the skills that get you there. So when you take a job and you start a career, you don't want to do what you think you should do. You want to do what you know you should do. So I'll tell you exactly what I did. When I started my career, Kepler, I went and got 6 silly certifications. I got an MCSC, a Microsoft Certified Professional, a CCNA, a CCNP, a CCDA, and a CCDP. And there was not a company in the world that had any inkling to hire me. And then after that, I called some recruiters in San Jose, California, because that was where, Cisco was headquartered. That was the Silicon Valley in those days. And then I called many more and I said, if you were going to look for a network architect, what skills would you want to have the best network architect? And they told me. And I spent a couple months learning them, then I got my first job. And when I got my first job, I found the VP of architecture. And I said, okay, Mr. VP of network architecture, could you tell me the skills that it takes to be a principal architect or a distinguished architect? What is it of the best architects? Who makes it to that level? And he told me. So I started learning those things, and poof, I was a principal architect. So I don't like to guess on the skills. Please don't ever assume there's any kind of real job description you're ever going to see in your entire life. They're generally not. There are enterprise companies that, literally speaking, and I'm not joking, have millions of people that have 10 or 15 different job descriptions for every position in the entire company. There's just so much overlap. So there's that. So companies do this. Sometimes they try to do it to cast a wide net, and Christina Marino talks about that. So let's have one that is solutions architect for a cloud provider. What I really want is someone that knows that architecture is not engineering. So if they're a network architect, they know how to respond to an RFI, RFP, RFQ, present to the board, lead an architecture team, do all that stuff that architects have. So then it's only a little bit of data center stuff and poof, they're good to go. Maybe I've got an application architect. Well, guess what? If they still know how to design, how to meet with clients, how to give executive presentations and all that, that's 50, 60% of the role. Yeah, they know applications. Okay, let's teach them infrastructure security and they'll be good to go. That's why they often do that, is they're looking for roles that are similar but different. And because they know that certifications don't provide any real world skills in today's world, they used to, but they don't in today's world. They're looking for something that they can use to try to anchor on and see if they want to talk to you. That's the other side of it. Hope that helps. John Doe, I heard you say earlier that the more you get promoted in cloud architecture, the further you get from the technology. Any exceptions to those? Yes. So typically speaking, you can go one of two paths in your technology career. And there's not one right or there's not one wrong. There is a big difference to your salary. So typically speaking, those at closest to the business, the C-suite, the executive vice presidents, the senior vice presidents, and then the vice presidents typically earn far more than any technology professional in an organization. So keep that in the back of your mind. So I'll talk more about that. Now, if you really want to think about it, I want you to think about two different skills and think about which would be more valuable on the street. And I can tell you, because I had to swap one skill for the other. I, at one point, was one of the world's leading experts on IP multicast video and IP multicast solutions. John Doe, that was a great job. It got me about a $200,000 salary. I was a principal architect. That was 20 years ago. And I wasn't going anywhere past that. That was the ceiling. There's no way above that. And why was that? Because I was an expert on the technology and I was an expert on making the technology work. Then after that, I wanted to move into a bigger role. And I had a manager that gave me the best advice ever. And my manager said, Mike, you're a CCIE, you got all these 18 million certifications, you got a CISP, you got all this stuff. And he said, you know what? You can't go any further. And he said, I know it's driving you crazy. And I said, why? He said, because your tech, at some point, you're already priced out of the market. They're always going to find someone that's good in tech. And that's your limit. And I said, well, what would you do if you were me? And he said, Mike, he said, right now, you're an expert on the tech. He said, but imagine if you were an expert on what the tech could do for the business. So instead of talking about an IP video solution, you were able to actually go to these internet service providers and cable providers and create a business case on why investing in $1 billion of this stuff might yield $8 or $9 billion of revenue, and build a business case of after the initial infrastructure build out and calculate their financing costs to do it. Then you can show them that by paying this per month, they're going to generate this revenue and this type of, and I come on. I went, oh. And he said, part of that is now you're not, sure, you can be the greatest thing you want in your one thing, but he said, you're as good as yourself. And I said, yeah. He said, if I can build your leadership skills and now you can drive a team of 50 people and you're the leader, now you're an army of 50. And he said, because you won't be touching the technology, you'll be coordinating it. Now you're going to be driving bigger outcomes. I went, So I got a lot of executive business training, leadership training, and went and did an MBA. And he said, it's not just that, Mike. He said, now imagine you've got a client that doesn't really understand the benefits of the technology. They get it. Their whole team gets it, but they can't figure it out. And my manager said, if you can ethically influence that manager into making that decision to buy the architecture that saves that business, you can keep that business from losing money and people from getting laid off. And I went, okay, I really like this. And then he started to show me, wow, you're only as good as your team is. So yes, generally speaking, your salaries will be much, much, much higher as you get further away from the technology. And I can also show you the why, and I want to show the other side of the why is this. Because I think it might be helpful. And then after that, what I'll actually do is, let me bear with me. I got to rearrange my screen to actually show this. But I'll show you the other side of it, and I'll show you the path to stay technical. Because if you want to stay technical, you can, but you're going to have to give up something in the way of salary and career potential. But I'll show you how to maximize that too. But just bear with me one second. So here's the reason why. Let me see if I can share this. Okay, so if you're familiar with macroeconomics or microeconomics, there's typically this supply and demand curve that we typically talk about. And what it means is at a given quantity, at a given demand, there will be different pricing. So as we increase the quantity of people, so let's take something that everybody knows how to do, write code. Everybody in every college is taught how to write code, which is why I've always told people not to learn how to code unless that was their dream. You can see a lot of people are trained for the role, and here's a given demand. So now let's, instead of talking about how to code, let's just say we're talking about architecture skills. So now it's not the how-to anymore, which lots of people know how to, but now it's the why. It's the how the technology works. It's the how the technology fits together. It is how do you make it work into a cohesive strategy? Okay, now here's your new intersection of price. Now, when you go from that, right now we're still talking, mostly a technical architect. Now we add a lot more business knowledge. And now we actually understand how to tune the business as opposed to focusing on the technology. Now we can drive a team of 50 to 100 people to a resolution. Now we can start improving the organization's business processes and finding gaps in areas of improvement. Now I can convince the C-suite to spend $1 billion to actually improve their business. And now I can manage the stakeholders, manage the campaign for change, and get everybody excited to change and drive real business value. This is your new salary. This person is an $800,000 chief architect. This person in here, is the principal architect. They're still pretty good. This person over here is your basics here. This person here is your cloud architect, and this person here is more your solutions architect. They're all good jobs. They're all great jobs. So the question is that, but that's the reason, typically speaking, if you're closer to the business, you earn more. Because if you take a business that does $20 billion a year in revenue, you can create some kind of sales improvement that adds 1%. You just brought in $200 million of revenue. That feeds a lot of the employee staff. I kind of hope that makes sense. It's counterintuitive, and it's the thing that hurt me in my career because I love the tech so much, but I had to learn to move to business to move up. Chris Manager, you're currently a security architect. Wonderful, with 3 years of experience. I have a CISSP and working on your CISM. I want to pivot to a CISO position. What program do I recommend to achieve it? Okay, Chris, I've actually worked with quite a few of you. I would probably say the Enterprise Architect program would be your best bet. Because in this particular program, what we're going to do is we're going to take that CISSP and CISM. We're going to round you out with some of those other forms of technologies that you may not know about. And then we're going to boost a lot more of the executive presence, executive leadership skills, executive everything. And that would make it easy for you to get a CISO role. But in addition to that CISO role, that could even move you to bigger roles if you choose to. I can tell you very recently in my cloud architect program, I had a person that I had trained. He was not in a tech role previously, but he communicated very well and he had great leadership skills. We got to work with him. And it's hilarious because he initially applied for a cloud admin role. Then poof, he applied for a cloud. They said not good enough. Applied for a cloud security architect role. Then they interviewed him. They said it's not big enough. And he is in the CISO's office of a scary large organization working directly for them. And I perceive in a couple of years, this person can be in that type of a CISO role because of his leadership skills. But he was definitely in our enterprise architect program. Chris, that's what I would recommend. And I would love to work with you and potentially talk to you about some other things as well. But that's what I would recommend because of that leadership skills and who's teaching it, because of the people. I mean, we have content in there from PhD business school professors, many MBAs, other enterprise architects, other C-suite people. I think it would be great for you. And I'd love to work with you. And I'm always appreciate your presence here. How can you stand out when applying for architect positions? Well, assuming you're going to apply and not create a world of people that are going to come and collect you, which is generally speaking what I like to do. It's about making your resume and CV stand out. So when I look for an architect, when I see most architecture resumes, what I normally see is something that doesn't look like it has anything related to architecture. And that's where it's coming from. So what's on your architect resume? Are you talking about what you've done? So do you have a good executive summary that explains why I should continue to read your resume? Do you have architecture things on your resume? For example, do you talk about responding to RFIs, RFPs, and RFQs? And if somebody interviews on you, can you talk about it? Can you talk about the architecture process that you've done? For example, created architectures following this type of methodology or this type of a framework. And please don't put well-architected framework. If you do, it's going to terrify me. And why? When I'm looking to hire an architect, I'm looking for a person that's going to take the client's needs and what the client's goals and evaluate them and make a recommendation. Right now, all three of the well-architected frameworks that existed that I've seen make complete recommendations without knowing someone's needs. So that's like a orthopedic surgeon saying, everybody's getting surgery, even though I don't know why, because that's what I do. So a TOGAF or a Zachman framework, if you're using it, will typically stand out. If you're talking about giving presentations to the C-suite and the board, that'll definitely be there. If you're talking about leading architecture teams and you know how to do it and you've done it, that's going to look good for you. If you're talking about managing stakeholders and managing vendors, and you can speak to that when they ask you about it, you're going to stand out great on your interview. If you talk about creating architecture repositories and what goes on with that, again, you're going to stand out great on your interview. So it's all about showing that. Now, I'll tell you, if I look at 99% of resumes that say cloud architect or solutions architect, I can actually tell that person doesn't even know what an architect is. And I'll tell you the dead giveaways. I am a cloud architect / cloud engineer. No, you're not. You're a cloud engineer. And here's the reason why. If you don't know the difference, it means you're focused on the tech as opposed focused on the business and the strategy. And that means even if the person wants to be an architect, if they're still focused on the tech instead of the business outcomes, can't hire them. Now, when I see someone, and it happened to Arun, and I think Arun will join us tomorrow externally on stage if he can. Arun was someone that had all this engineering-y stuff on his resume. He wanted to be an architect. He wanted to be a cloud architect. He has the sysops and DevOps and Python code and Terraform hunters, things that he was doing. And I looked at his resume and he's like, Mike, I keep going on interviews and they're all technical. Nobody hires me. I want to be hired as an architect. And I said, well, Arun, you're trained as an architect. Show me your resume. Guess what happened? He showed me a resume with all this icky techie stuff like Python and Git. And it was all great for other careers, but the worst thing you have for an architect. I removed it and talked about other resume things. Poof, he had 3 interviews. His interviews went better. And he had 3 job offers because he was awesome. He just needed that. So the first thing is being able to put it. The second thing is posting relevant things. So you designed a 3-tier architecture. So what? Now, if you designed a 3-tier architecture that improved sales by XYZ%, that's what I care about. So the key for architects is to remember you're not engineers. If an engineer can build something cool tech-wise, that makes them shine. If you can design something and it provides a business outcome, a positive business outcome, you shine. And that's one of the reasons it's so hard because, I want to hire an architect. I get 50,000 engineering roles. And, this is just a different job. So there's that. Now, it should be easy to read your resume. It should make it very clear what you do. Now, your resume should not give you any rope to hang you. For example, last week, and I'll talk about what to do in the interview. We did some interviews, and I had interviewed a person with nearly 40 years experience. They had on their resume MPLS-LSP, and this person was a smart person. So I said, okay, you said MPLS. Okay, let's talk about how you would signal an MPLS tunnel. Or what happens if you swap a label at which hop along the egress, the penultimate hop or the last hop? And the person was like, huh? And this was a smart person, a really good person, a person that a company would be lucky to have. But they had stuff on their resume that they can't do. And what happens in an interview if someone's got something on their resume they can't have? So having things there. Don't have a website showing what you do. Don't put a Git page on your architect position. So I see a Git page. I see engineer, not interested. I see an architecture webpage. I see some thought leadership documents. I see some architectural references. I see some presentations. I get excited. And if that's not the case and you don't have that background, find a company that will give you space. For example, many of our students in our program, I've given them the opportunity to join published books and other things with us. And we do it because we want to build their brand. But you're going to have to find people that you can do that with. But at least do that. That's how you stand out. Give a presentation. Have a perspective. Write some good LinkedIn content that's not written by ChatGPT. The whole point of writing the content is to prove you have a voice and there's something special about you. So don't show your voice, show your thing, show what's special about you, show your positive attitude, energy, enthusiasm. Now in the interview itself. Short and to the point. If you have to explain technology, what is the tech? How does the tech work? What's it in it for the business? Frame it. Get to the point quickly when you respond to things and be honest. I'll tell you right now, the largest reason in my life I don't hire people is not incompetency. It's actually lies. I just don't hire people I don't trust. I'm a really lucky guy. I met my wife when I was 21 years old. It's been about 30 years. We're still together. And if I didn't trust her, I couldn't have married her. I couldn't have these wonderful 30 years. But thankfully, she's put up with me for 30 years. Because you can't have trust. I don't hire people I don't trust either. Ever. So if you don't know how to answer something, be honest. And point them to what you know. You know what, Cloud Doctor? On Friday this week, we're going to have a session on different kinds of interviews that are typically done in the interview process for tech careers. So please join us for that one. Love to actually help you there, and we'll talk about it. And kind of come tomorrow and listen to some of the architects speak. I hope none of them get pulled into like a last minute flight, because sometimes it happens. We architects like, yeah, we're going to be in the office. Nope, go to England. Go to Dubai, but usually fun places. So I kind of hope that helps. So if you've got some questions, don't be shy, ask them. Otherwise, I'm going to go back to work, back to doing some of the things behind the scenes, which I'm totally happy to do. But I do try to make this time for you, but I don't want them to all come at the last minute where we can't answer them. Cloud Doctor, how important is understanding business strategy and processes for the enterprise architect? What resources would you recommend to develop this knowledge? So, Cloud Doctor, imagine you had a physician that didn't know anything about the body, that didn't know anything about how the body worked, that didn't know how the body was structured, and didn't understand medications. And all of a sudden, they tried to prescribe you a pill. I know what I would do. I'd run. So the point of the enterprise architect is to align the organization's people, processes, and technology. So here's what happens if you don't align them correctly. So many years ago in healthcare, we had paper records. And here's the way it was. Here was the actual process for the average physician, nurse practitioner, physician assistant. A patient would come to the office and say, I have this problem. And we'd say, okay. So if somebody came in and they had a sore throat, for example, I'd bring them in. What brings you in? They'd say a sore throat. I'd say what makes it better, what makes it worse, what have you. I'd do that for 2 or 3 minutes to try to get an understanding of what's going on. Then I would say, can I examine you? They'd say yes. I'd look in their ears, nose, throat, look in their eyes, feel their lymph nodes, listen for carotid bruits, Then I would listen to their lungs. I would listen to their heart. I'd push on their belly. I'd culture them and say, you have a pharyngitis, specifically strep throat. I'm going to give you this medication. So I have to know how to do that, right? I had to go through a lot of things. If I didn't know how to talk to the person, how to diagnose the person or the condition, what could I have actually done there? None of it. But here's what happened. We used to do this, and here was the process. And the process gave me, the way it was, 12 minutes to see my patients. And I could spend 12 minutes seeing my patients and 1 to 3 minutes with my notes, because the note was easy. Subjective, patient had a sore throat. Objective, throat erythematous, positive strep test. Assessment, pharyngitis. Plan, amoxicillin, 500 milligrams a day. So 12 minutes with patients, 2 to 3 minutes with paper. The U.S. government came in, along with a whole bunch of tech companies, that told everybody that they can make healthcare more efficient. And then America had 98,000 patient deaths related to medical errors. And because it was related to sloppy handwriting and lack of information exchange between doctors. And truth be told, it sure seemed that way because nurses were literally placing bets. Did Mike write this prescription or this prescription? So lots of room for errors, right? So poof, you have free money for electronic health records, but if you don't get electronic health records, we're going to pay you less for the medical care you do, doctors and hospitals. So poof, government helped pay for all these electronic healthcare systems. Now, here's how it changed the process, Cloud Doctor. Remember how I said I used to spend 12 minutes seeing my patient and 3 minutes writing a note? These technology systems, these electronic health records and CPOE, physician order entry systems, were so cumbersome and so ugly that it takes about 12 minutes per patient to write my note versus the 3 minutes on paper. So now the doctor that used to spend 12 minutes with their patient actually examining and diagnosing them now spends 3 minutes with their patients. And then they then spend 12 minutes on the computer checking off boxes. So Cloud Doctor, the characters that redesigned the technology didn't understand the business processes. Let's talk about what happened in U.S. healthcare statistics. Well, on these paper notes where it was scritchy scratch garbage and nobody exchanged any information, medical errors were 98,000 in the United States. 98,000 people per year died on medical errors. So we fixed it, right? We put in these new technology platforms that now mean we spend 12 minutes with the patient and 3 minutes with, 12 minutes with the tech and 3 minutes with the patient as opposed to the other way. Poof, new problem. Medical errors are now the third leading cause of death in the United States, and they've gone up over 250%. Now 250,000 people die per year in America because of medical errors. So, did you see what happens here? The people didn't know what doctors did. They shoved some technology down their throat, and poof, they've killed an additional 150,000 people per year for the last 10 years, which is over 1 million people. So that's how bad it could be. I've seen people that didn't understand business design a new technology strategy and a new architecture, and it took a profitable business and it bankrupted them. So if some architect doesn't understand business strategy, they have no means in being an architecture. In fact, Cloud Doctor, you can always tell the architects that you need to run away from. You'll see the architect and they have an architecture role and they're learning Python or they're learning DevOps and they're working on their 45th certification. Now, if they work for a cloud vendor that says, here, do this, and I'll give you a bonus because we want to say, okay, that's fine. I get it. But whenever you see an architect that's focused on learning how to do somebody else's job and not learning, improving their business acumen, their leadership, their presence, they're actually spending their time in what's not in their client's best interest. Kind of like instead of a doctor doing their medical education, they decided to learn how to fly an airplane instead of becoming a better doctor. So it's very important, Cloud Doctor. It breaks my heart that 70 to 80% of the time, the architectures hurt the clients or don't help them at all. 80% of the time, 70 to 80% of the time, they actually fail. And they fail because people look at, is the new shiny technology. Look how exciting this thing is. But they don't know what it's going to do for the business. So there's that. So how would you develop business strategy? You can do what I do, or you could simply take my course. I'll tell you what I did. I realized I needed to learn more. So I went and got a master's in business administration to learn more. That gave me some of the business strategy that I needed. Cisco was very kind. They sent me to a lot of managerial training and a lot of leadership training, a lot of business strategy training and management and strategy consulting training, probably 6 figures worth. I can't guarantee that. I don't exactly know, but these were expensive places. And I learned that. And that's what I put into our enterprise architect and our elite programs, because there's that. Failing that, how do you learn business strategy? I would say go to a business school, get hired at a McKinsey, Deloitte, Accenture, KPMG, Capgemini, work a year or two, and you'll learn strategy consulting. And it's not a bad path. I have many friends that have done it. And then it would just be learning the technology architecture piece. Or you could just take our enterprise architecture class and learn all of what you need, and then maybe do some advanced degrees later to give you even more opportunities. That's what I would do. I can tell you what I did. I basically did the MBA, the executive training, and then learned how to do consulting to actually learn it. But I'm not sure everybody needs to spend that many years. I'm not sure that people need to spend $200,000 to learn these skills. I've trained lots of people with these skills for basically a few days' pay. But that's how I've done it. And they're the only 2 ways that I actually know on how to do that. Okay, any last questions for me? Otherwise, I'm going to go back. I've got a tremendous amount of work, and my wife is actually home. So I've got lots of places, unless there's any last questions, in which case I really do want to help. I want you to have a better cloud architect career, cloud engineering career, security engineering career, enterprise architecture career, because I know it's been so kind to me. How long is the enterprise architecture training? Until you have an enterprise architecture job. So what does that realistically mean? It means that you can stay in the live classes for a year, and you can stay in the non-live version of that for a long time. Personally, I would say you probably have some form of a job as an architect in 8 to 12 months if you keep working and following the program. But the reality is, if it takes you a little longer, we're going to stand by you. All we care is that you're hired. That's the only thing that matters to me at the end of the day. And it matters so much to me because I can tell you, when I started my technology career, it was one of those things where I was just lost, and I didn't know where to go and didn't know where to go. And sometimes, not all the time, some of us learn faster, some of us learn slower. For example, my wife learned Spanish in 10 days because her translators couldn't understand her thoughts. I mean, freakishly learns like that. I'll tell you what, I had actually, but we all have areas of stumbling. For when I was a kid, I paid my way through school by being a firefighter paramedic. And before that, I was an EMT. I think I scored the skate's highest score in the EMT exam, but I couldn't figure out how to seatbelt someone aboard until somebody taught about it. So we all have different things that we learn at different paces. So we'll stay with you there. But I'd say 8 to 12 months for the cloud architect program, potentially an extra 3 to 6 months for the enterprise architecture, because I want you to be great. Steve Miller, any advice for a security analyst with 5 years wanting to move into a security architecture role, and what would the roadmap look like? So Delroy Batt was a student of ours, never worked in tech, and he got his first job as a cloud security architect. And I can give you, and I'll give you our first job as a security architect. So here's the good news. The good news is you have some background in security, which is wonderful. Understand, analyst and architect are actually at the exact opposite side of the spectrum. So we have to do two things for you. One is we have to make you look like an architect and not an analyst. And that's going to be a complete and total brand makeover. And I've had to do that with my best engineers. For example, Harsha was a cloud engineer with like 10 plus years experience. We had to do some rebranding. It took about a year to turn him into an architect. Jawad, really great cloud engineer. We got him hired by AWS, but it took us about 8 to 12 months to take the engineering out of him and make him think and more act like an architect. Then poof, he was hired. So there's that. So here's what you need to do. First is we need to get you architecture knowledgeable. So that's not on how to do. It's more looking into things. I will tell you, I've got, typically speaking, 3 certifications that I typically do with security architects. And what we're actually talking about is the CISSP. To me, the CISSP is what I consider bare minimum intro level security knowledge. I like the CISM and the CCSP. There's a CCSP certification we did. I'd say those 3 certifications really make a portfolio good, and it gives someone about 30 to 40% of everything they need for this architecture role. The next thing is, somewhere along the line, you're going to need someone to teach you architecture. I know we do, but here's what I mean by architecture. So instead of just looking at logs on a SIEM system, or instead of the engineers that could be configuring the firewalls and the IDS systems, now we're talking about big picture. So you're going to have to learn how to design the security strategy. You're going to have to understand how to lead security teams. You're going to have to understand how to quantify security risks and perform risk management strategies, helping that organization understand when to transfer the risk versus mitigate the risk, what have you. You'll be doing a lot more of risk mitigation planning. You're going to have to learn how to sell, and you're going to have to manage stakeholders and learn how to do a lot of vendor management, because in enterprise security, we could be dealing with a firewall from Checkpoint in Palo Alto, and at the same time, we've got a Splunk SIEM system, and we've got this data loss prevention system, and we've got these systems for IAM and these systems. So it's a lot of vendor management and coordination. Now, next is learning how to design that end-to-end policy security policy, and that end-to-end security architecture. So where do we encrypt on the network? What do we need to encrypt? What kinds of encryption should we use? For example, if we use TLS encryption, we encrypt the payload of the packet. For if we use an IPsec encryption for with movement data that's moving, and we use tunnel mode, we encrypt the header and the payload. So in one environment, you can see that I'm talking to someone, you just can't see what I'm talking about. And in another environment, you can't see any of it. So what can we do on the network? Where do we put our firewalls? Where do we put our packet filters? Where do we put our IDS, IPS systems? Which types of these systems should we use based upon our given business needs? What type of data loss prevention strategy should we use? What kind of event logging strategy should we use across our 3 clouds and 2 data centers? What kind of incident response procedure should we actually design, for example? What kind of IAM strategy should we use? How do we map zero trust with our defense in depth and other forms of microsegmentation that should be part of zero trust, but may not necessarily be? How do we adapt to this architecture framework? How do we present to the CISO and convince them to buy something? How do we present at executive briefings? How do we present at conferences? These are what we do, Steve, as security architects. So generally speaking, you need training to go from analyst or engineer to architect, unless the following. If you ever worked as a strategy consultant, or like me in your youth, you learned how to practice, say, medicines, you learned how to approach a problem in a holistic manner, you typically need training for this. And we've got lots of training. We train lots of people in our cloud architect program. But that's really what we're actually talking about. So that's what I would do, is I would either get some training like that, or I would take what you have and I would go to business school, because the difference between the architect and the engineer is the business acumen. So my goal for you would be to take you where you're at, train you to be an architect, and your next job is a security architect. And then after that, it's a senior security architect, then it's a principal security architect, and then either you stay in the tech side, or you move into a CISO role, or you move into a CIO role, but that's going to be based upon more business. But that's what I would do if I was you. But that's what I've done. For me, when I get someone a security architect job, it's their first job. And the key to remember is engineering and analysis, architecture, they're all so different. So you've got a lot of good skills. So you'll be able to take with you the knowledge of what these SOC reports are. You'll probably understand what goes on in a security operations center. And you'll probably understand that back end stuff. That will be great when you create statements of work, for example, and you're looking for the simplicity and how do you simplify things to make it easier to manage. And that will be very valuable experience. And I want you to take from that. But then the rest of what I want you to take is realize that now you're moving to strategy. So it's now about all of this as opposed to just this. And that if you ever go and just look at just this for the most part and you stare too long, you're going to miss what goes on around you. Join me on the webinar tomorrow, how to become a cloud architect. Or if you'd like more questions now, I'd love to answer more if you've got another question. That's what I would do. And but it should be your next job if you're training properly. There should be no midpoint. I've got lots of security architect people, their job is their first tech job ever. Elevation to me, Mike, are you saying that if you sign up for the enterprise architect program, it involves all the components of the cloud architect? 100% yes. So the enterprise architect program is the cloud architect program plus all those enterprisey things. And if you signed up for the cloud architect program and you want to upgrade it to the enterprise architect program, for example, just send an email to info@GoCloudCareers, or send an email, and all we can do is have you pay the difference, and you can be bumped up to the enterprise architect program and still have all the components of the cloud architect program. Absolutely. Jose, how can you successfully transition from a Cisco network engineer to a cloud architect and learn your first role? First, Jose, I don't know what a Cisco network engineer is, and I actually worked for Cisco. And here's what I mean is, do you know OSPF? Do you know BGP? Do you know IS to IS? Do you know VPLS? Do you know MPLS? All of that is the same on every single router and switch. I've also never really seen a company in the entire world that doesn't have some combination of Cisco, Juniper, Extreme, Palo Alto, FortiGate, and other devices there. So let's say you are a network engineer. and not a Cisco network engineer. Because if you were to tell somebody Cisco engineer, and I mean this in a polite way, most managers would just toss your resume to the side. So you are a network engineer, not a Cisco engineer. Even if you're only working on networking, you should know how to work on any other company. So assuming you've got that good engineering background, and I think I made a video, network engineer to cloud architect, we have to remember that what you're dealing with now is engineering. So I ask you this, would you know how, so let's talk about the architecture versus engineering. And also today, Jose, my good friend Russ' wife, the best one of the best network architects I've ever met in my life, who also was one of the best network engineers I've ever read, also was on our YouTube channel today. And Tyrone drop a link that we talked about the difference of engineering and architecture. We talked about why being an engineer will not teach you architecture. And he was a distinguished architect at Cisco. I was basically a chief architect for a vertical at Cisco. So we're basically coming at it from the same perspective. Similar experience. Russ has even more experience than me. So understand that. So, and see that. So understanding that you have network engineering, understand you're in a good place. Because what is the cloud? The network and the data center. So hopefully you can take with you knowledge of BGP. Not how to configure it, but hopefully you read Bassam Halabi's internet routing architectures and you read the appropriate RFCs, and you now know BGP, because BGP is an absolute critical skill. So now you know how to architect your BGP when you're using eBGP, when you're using iBGP. You know the BGP finite state machine. You know the BGP attributes, for example. You know BGP traffic engineering and how to scale things. If you know that from your network engineering, awesome, because you're going to use that a lot in cloud architecture. Now you will still, because we deal with a lot of private clouds, need to have some knowledge of interior gateway protocols. Not how to go to a router and type config t router OSPF1 network 10.0.0.0.0.0.0.3 / something like that, area 0. Not that. But if you understand OSPF and you understand how the Dijkstra algorithm actually works, and you understand the LSA flooding and the types of LSAs and how you would design and performance team your OSPF, good, you know that too. And I'm assuming you know how to do your IP addressing, how you would build an IP addressing plan for a company. If not, you'll need to learn where you would do your route aggregation, what you could do to make those networks scale. This is high-end network engineering, borderline network architecture, and it could go either way at those points. Except for the architect is going to be focused on the business, and the engineer is going to be focused on the tech. So assuming you have those things already, and assuming you understand how and what kind of wide area network to select, and you understand layer 2 redundancy protocols and switching, for example, how and when to use VRRP or PERV or spanning tree, rapid spanning tree. I'm assuming you get that already. So if you have that, now you need to learn architecture. And what's architecture? Well, first, now you need to learn the data center. So that means learning virtual machines. It means learning containers. It means learning functions as a service, how these systems work and where you would apply them. It involves learning storage, such as, and please join us in the free webinar tomorrow, but it involves storage like block storage, object storage, file storage, when you would use them, how these systems work, the strengths and weaknesses of each storage profile, how you would work around performance needs of these things in your architecture. Then you would have to think about security. How would you secure your systems, your identity and access management systems? Where would your firewalls go, your IDS, IPS systems? What kind of encryption kind of strategies should you use? What do you deal with data in flight, data in storage, data being processed by the CPU's host? So you need to understand that to a degree. Now, you're also going to need to know some AI. Now, again, it's not going to be how to code the AI, but it's going to be understanding how AI systems are built, and the way models are built, the way models are trained, the kind of model selection, the types of AI that's available and usable, because this is part of our job. It's also understanding databases and what kind of databases provide what use and how you would scale databases. Again, we're not touching them. And there's an element of big data, whether it be streaming data or whether it be managing data or data hygiene practices that we typically need to know. And that's mostly the technical piece. So if you get that, of course, we teach this in our program, but you could get some of the tech outside. Now, the next thing you need to realize is this is a business role. So you are going to have to get the job, you're going to have to give a presentation. In the job, you will give presentations probably every day. So you're going to have to be really good at presenting. So you're going to need to go get presentation skills somewhere. Quite frankly, I went back and forth to Speakeasy and had many presentation coaches over the years. It's included in our training program. If not, you're going to have to do that. And there's good presentation places, but they're going to charge you more for 3 days of skills than our entire program would. So just think about that. But I have no problem with you doing that. That's what I had to do. I didn't have a program like mine. Now, the next thing you need to understand is you are going to have to understand business, because you're going to be in a position where you're going to be paid to optimize someone's business. And if you don't know business, you can't do it. So you could take a course like ours, or you could learn business. How would I learn business if I didn't take a course like ours? I would either get an MBA, or I would get a list of every book that's used in an MBA program, and I'd read them cover to cover twice. Why? Because when you can't ask questions in class, you're not going to learn it as easy. So I would do that for the business acumen. Now, you're going to need executive presence. Now, we teach our clients how to have greater executive presence. I personally had an executive coach and took executive presence training, which is how I learned it to teach it. If you're with us, it's included, but if not, you're going to get some. Now, understand that in our job, in most cases, we are selling. So either we work at, say, a Cisco, for example, and we could be a cloud architect there. We could also be a solutions architect. We could be any kind of role we want, including an enterprise architect there. We could also be at a cloud provider, or we could be at a consulting firm. And part of our jobs as architects is to not only meet with the client, learn the client's needs, but help sell them the solution that the engineers are going to build later. So you're going to need good sales skills. So no big deal, include it in our training program, or go get some sales training from some qualified salespeople, because you're just going to need it. In either case, you're going to get there. And that's going to give you the majority of it. But you're also going to have to learn how to build teams and lead teams. And that one's something you don't typically get in your MBA program. You typically need a little bit of leadership coaching, soft skills coaching, those kind of things. And a couple other things you're going to be dealing with is a lot of vendor management and stakeholder management. So obviously we teach it, but if you're not with us, there are other companies that do teach stakeholder management, and make sure you got that. You do those things and learn how to design it, and learn how to put the pieces together, and learn how to take the benefits. Because I think you probably brought with you a great degree of expertise from your time in networking. Because the cloud is just a network and a data center. So you're halfway there. But that's what it would be. I've got a lot of CCIEs that I'm working with, and they turn into great cloud architects. They're usually the easiest people, because they typically have a big background in a lot of the infrastructure, and they understand what makes the tech work versus what makes the tech not work, and where the tech breaking points are. So one of those things that I tend to use, but that's realistically speaking what it's going to take to get you to your goals. And you'll get there and you'll be surprised. But, I've got a free document on this channel. Tyrone can pop it in on how to become a cloud architect. And look at that document and look at every skill we have and assess yourself realistically. Do I have it? And if not, where am I going to get it? And if you get all those skills, there are more jobs than you can imagine. People will be fighting over you because it's so impossible to find a cloud architect. Sure, I can find 18 million AWS certified people, but if I go ask them how to design something, they don't know. If I ask them which services I can't even use in multi-cloud, they don't know. And if I ask them about the processors in these systems and how it pertains to compute performance, they don't know, so I can't hire them. So make sure you learn these things, but networking is a great background. I hope that helps, Jose. Sorry about that, Jose. Okay, well, it looks like there's no more questions there. So, Chris, I'm always happy to have you here. It is always wonderful to see you. Maybe pop in on one of the Zoom webinars too. I'd love to meet you in person if I haven't already. So thank you so much for coming today. I hope we were able to answer some of your career questions. I hope we were able to clarify some of those points that we're actually talking about, points on job descriptions, points on skills that you actually need, points on what it takes to be successful. Because I want you to be successful. I want you to have an incredibly good life. And I want you to have a career you love. I had a career prior to tech. I was a nurse, then a nurse practitioner. I had my own internal medicine office. I did that for a little while, which I liked. But when I found tech, it was my love. I was driven to it with a force that you can't even imagine. And I loved it. It's been my life. And I spent the last 20 years helping people like you get to your goals. So thanks, everybody. It was so nice to see you today.